Welcome to Page One, the show for writers with the reader in mind. Here's your host, Zita Christian.
Hi everyone, welcome to Page One. I'm Zita Christian. My guest tonight is a good friend and a fabulous writer. Her third book was just published by Simon & Schuster. The book is called A Young Wife, and the author is Pam Lewis. Pam, thanks very much for being on the show.
It's a great pleasure.
Now, I know that this is a character-rich story, which is my favorite kind. And it has a very rich sense of history, has a very strong sense of place, and it's got a lot of conflict. But for me, best of all, there's an element of truth in the story. So tell us what the story's about.
Okay. Well, the story is about, well, let me just back up a minute and tell you that the origin of the story is are events from my grandmother's life.
For real? I mean, your grandmother?
My real grandmother.
Maternal?
Maternal.
Okay.
And I knew very little of her early life because my mother, I think, didn't want us to know a lot of what happened in the past. But what I did know about her was that as a young girl, 15, 16 years old, she had gone into the home of a much older man to care for a dying relative. I'm not sure whether it was a wife or a daughter or who. And after that, he married her, or may not have married her, I'm not sure. But anyway, the next thing I knew was that the two of them were living in Comodoro Rivadavia in Argentina.
And where had they started?
They had started in the Netherlands in a small fishing village called Ecknowledgement. And then they were in Argentina, and my grandmother used to tell me stories about that, about the gauchos that would ride up and how she was the only European woman in the whole place. And but she always spoke of it with so much love and affection that I knew it had been a wonderful thing for her. And the next thing I knew was that she was living in New York, and he was nowhere to be found, and there was no more mention of him. And that she had 4 young daughters, my mother being the eldest, and she found work at the home of the Wiley sisters, a pair of maiden sisters whose brother was the public relations person at the New York Times in one of the earlier forces of public relations. And then I also knew that my mother had to give up a full scholarship to Swarthmore in order to go to work to support the family. Also, she at the age of about 16. So that's what I knew. And I knew these are fabulous places, New York at the turn of the century, and the Netherlands, and then Argentina. So I really had the perfect sort of bones on which to write, to hang a fiction story. So from that point on, everything else I virtually made up.
Really?
Yes, yes. I learned much later in my mother's life that my grandfather had abandoned my grandmother for her younger sister. So it became, that turned out to be the thing my mother was not going to let us find out, at least as children. So, I mean, that became part of working with the character of this man I knew nothing about. I thought, anything goes. If he's going to do that, I can do whatever I want. So.
Well, and isn't that the beauty of fiction?
Oh, absolutely, yes. Absolutely.
You can have revenge and do all sorts of things.
And then all the other characters had to be developed. I mean, only my grandmother is real in this, or she's not actually real. She's the prototype for the person in the book, and her younger sister, and the parents. But otherwise, everybody else is fully imagined.
Well, in the book, I know there are at least 3 pretty big themes. And I'm not asking you to give away the story, but I'd like for you to tell us a little about those 3, starting off with the theme of love.
Ah, yes. Well, that was very interesting. As I mentioned, that my grandmother had only wonderful things to say about Comodoro. And I always imagined it was a wonderful, wonderful place. While I was researching the book, I was able to get my hands on a book of photographs of Comodoro Rivadavia, which is now a major petroleum city. But at the time, someone was taking photographs when it was first developed. This would have been in 1908 to 19, maybe 20. And I was shocked at what I saw. It was such a frontier town. There were really no roads. There were just dirt paths. The oil gushed out of the sides of cliffs. And it was really a hard-scrabble life. They would have lived in a corrugated metal hut with a dirt floor.
Oh my.
Okay, so you wanted to know about love.
Uh-huh.
I always thought that the reason my grandmother talked about it so glowingly was how much she loved him. That's what I thought.
Oh.
And in fact, she loved him until that. So the whole theme of love was really easy to get my hands around. That she would really love this man, that he might not have been who she thought he was, but that she loved him deeply.
All right, and certainly loved the place.
And the place.
Because
yes.
I would think for many women, and for her, I mean, she's a young woman, I mean, 15 years old, coming to this totally foreign place, maybe one other woman who can speak the same language that she can converse with. I could see that the idea more of when's the next ship, I'm going home.
Right.
But
Absolutely.
she falls in love with the place.
Yes.
All right, what about the theme of betrayal?
Okay,
That's
betrayal.
a rich one.
It was huge. How do I talk about betrayal? Well, I'll just say that, you know, out of the story of my real grandmother, she was also very much in love with her husband, and then subsequently was trying to find her own way, an immigrant in New York with 4 very young daughters, alone. So she was very badly betrayed, and in the parallel fiction, Minka is very badly betrayed.
And the theme of redemption, because there is redemption.
Absolutely.
At the end.
Absolutely. And I definitely don't want to tell you what that is.
No, don't tell me, because
that
that
actually
will spoil
came
it.
as a surprise to me when I was writing it.
Ah.
I knew approximately how it would end, but the actual ending came as a surprise, and I'm very happy with it.
How soon towards the end did that? Did you know?
Very close to the end.
Really?
Very close to the end. She says something at one point. I'll just say that she thinks to herself, as soon as I've saved up enough money, I'm going to go back and, well, I think that it says it on the blurb, so I'm not going to have to keep this secret. Her child was kidnapped, and she had to leave. He was kidnapped in Argentina, and she had to leave to go to New York and leave him behind. But she decided, as soon as I have enough money, I am going to take, she by that time had a baby, my baby Ellie, and I'm going to find him if it's the last thing I do. And it was when she said that to herself, and that was probably maybe 30, 40 pages before the last chapter began, that was when I thought, interesting idea, you know, but she came up with the idea. I didn't, you know, my character came up with the idea.
Well, I love when that happens, when you create a character who is so rich and really does take on a life of his or her own. And there's a logic that you just didn't see before.
I didn't see it.
That comes as a surprise, although it is quite logical when you think of her character.
Yes, yes.
Absolutely.
But I really thought she would somehow find her way in New York.
Well, when you started out to write the story, because I remember a conversation we had early on, and you said you'd found this material about your grandmother, and you were exploring this idea of maybe writing a story about a woman who had a similar experience. So did you know at the beginning that it would be fiction? Had it ever occurred to you to say, I will write my grandmother's story?
I couldn't have, because there were too many holes in it.
Okay.
There was too much I didn't know. So no, it never occurred to me to write it as anything but fiction.
And in the writing, and in because I know you did a lot of research, which I'll get to in a minute. But what did you learn about your grandmother that you might not have known before? Because you knew her for a while she was alive.
Oh, I did. I did know her. I found out that she was stronger than I had thought. My mother my mother adored her mother, but she always characterized her as somehow not strong enough. Like my mother used to tell me that they would go into stores and my grandmother was too shy to ask the clerk for anything. So even as a young girl, my mother had to step up and ask for things. So I guess it surprised me that my grandmother was always such a lady and such a sweet, sweet person, that she was able to really pull this thing together and keep the family together, and they remained all very close. I learned a lot about the strength she had to have had.
She had to.
Yeah.
What about your own mother? What did you learn about her in writing the story? I mean, I would think, as you experience, as you experience, you write this, exploring, and you're writing this story, and this is about the grandmother, and then you know who you are, but there's the mother, your mother, in between. And I would think some part of the grandmother, the strength, perhaps, or the willingness to explore a new horizon, or perhaps to be prepared for a betrayal, or some theme in the story. Do you see any of it echoing in the family?
Well, certainly. I mean, it explained a lot about my mother and her point of view on things, that she had to work so hard and had to give up so much, and it really framed her character in very definite ways. She was just not going to allow anything like that to happen to her family. And as to myself, I think I always thought that we sort of skipped a generation, that I was much more like my grandmother than my mother. My mother was a highly organized, highly ambitious person, and my grandmother was a little more ethereal. So I think
well, let me go back to something we talked just briefly about a minute ago, and that's the research. Because even for an ethereal woman, you got to do some serious research to create a book like this.
Absolutely.
I mean, this is simply amazing.
Well, I have a very strong sense that, I mean, when I read, what I like to read is sort of visceral character. I want to be right there, smelling the things, feeling the things, knowing that. And the only way you can do that is at least with a book like this, is to do a lot of research. I downloaded a whole book called Old People and the Things That Pass, and it was a Dutch book written at the turn of the century. And I did it for the interiors. What would it look like? At the beginning of the book, Minka is in the attic of their little house. My sister and my Aunt Winnie and I all went to Enkhuizen to actually look at everything, and there's even a museum there with all these old reconstructed houses. So I could be in the house, know where the walls were, how close everything was together, what the kitchen would have looked like. So I did so much of that. And then, of course, the internet. I mean, if you just have a quick question, bingo, you get so much information. And there was a journey at sea, and I wanted to find out exactly what that was like, and and I had pictures of ships and holds and all kinds of things, so that I could really, really be there. And then I think the other part of that is that you just have to be careful about not letting all that research show. I mean, it shouldn't be any more in the characters' thoughts than it is for us today, what's all around us. So you have to really scale back a lot of what you know and just put in details. I also studied photographs very, very carefully with magnifying glasses. These were old. Well, I wanted to see everything else in the photograph. I mean, you see the family and you see, but it's everything else. It's like in some pictures in Comodoro, it's the things in the background, it's the cash register. What did that look like? It's the painting on the wall. I mean, those are the things I was really looking at. And in old family photographs, it was the same thing. You know, what did they have on their walls, and what you know, how wrinkled was the cloth? I mean, I don't know. It just helps. It all helps to get a real
it's the details.
Yeah.
I mean, I really felt that I was there.
Oh, good.
And I wanted to ask you now, have you ever been to Argentina?
No. And I thought about going because I would love to go. But the reason I didn't want to do it is that Comodoro, as I said earlier, is a major petroleum capital. I've seen photographs of it. It's high rises. It's, you know, and it would be nothing like it. And I could probably, you know, go out of that. But I was better off with my book and my imagination than
because if you went there, you wouldn't find the gauchos and the
I
silver
wouldn't find
saddles
anything.
and you know, riding across the
no.
plains, and we'd find the wild lightning. But sometimes it's better to use your imagination.
Yeah.
But I think, Pam, we have something in common when it comes to that part of the writing, and that is the love of research. So what do you do how do you know when you've done enough? Because I could just research, I could spend days and weeks just doing the research, just finding things out, discovering.
Well, I don't know if you do it before you write or while you're writing.
Both.
Oh, you do both. I do it all. Well, no, I guess I did a lot before. I read all the W.H. Hudson books, which are all about that part of the world, just for atmosphere. And I read a history of the New York Times, but that was before. But usually the way I was researching is when something would come up in the writing, then I would research it until, I don't know whether I could, I just got sort of tired maybe of I just didn't want to know more. I didn't need to know more, so then I would just go back to the
Like you have enough of this because now the story is bigger.
Yes, yeah.
It's fascinating. I just want to let you and the viewing audience know, if you're just joining us, you're watching Page One, and I'm talking with my friend Pam Lewis. And her third book, called A Young Wife, just came out. It's published by Simon & Schuster. And Pam, now I am going to ask you if you would do us a favor and read a little here from the book. I have the advanced copy here. But this always gives us a feel, you know, for the author's voice, which I always love. And I made a little mark on the next page over there where to stop. But this will give us an idea of the story.
Okay. Minka had heard his velvety voice downstairs. The visitor from Amsterdam must have arrived. Sander de Vries was his name, a wealthy man, according to rumor, and a distant relative, although in the Netherlands everyone was a distant relative. He owned a ship, or ships, or something. He had children older than Minka, and a wife who was dying. This was what she knew. She lay on the floor, peering down the ladder to the entry of the kitchen. Her mother's high-pitched laugh betrayed nervousness. Her older sister, Fenna, who at 16 had the most commanding voice, asked for his coat and scarf, inviting him to sit. Her father cleared his throat. In town, everyone would be talking about this visit. A stranger in Enkhuizen was an event. She swung her feet around and descended the ladder to the middle rung, where she hung on, leaning forward to catch a glimpse of him. She was supposed to stay out of sight because Fenna had already laid claim to the position he was expected to offer. Fenna was the thicker, stronger of the two sisters. Fenna, with her certainty and coarse sense of humor, had the stomach for a dying woman. In his lovely, smooth voice, Meneer, that's Mr. basically, Meneer de Vries spoke of his automobile, the icy conditions of the roads, and the stale smell of the sea here in Enkhuizen, and his regret that over the years their families had not been closer. In that silken voice, he explained it was his Elizabeth's idea that one of the Van Aysma girls be asked to come. Elizabeth was, as they knew, of course, the daughter of Papa's much older cousin, Clara, a name Minka recognized as that of the woman whose funeral she had attended in Leeuwarden 5 years earlier. Meneer's voice became grave. "This is work for a person of great patience," he said. "I'm patient," Fenna said quickly. "And what of the other girl?" He was talking about her. She stepped quietly down the ladder to peek into the parlor. He sat at the family table facing in her directions, his fingers drumming the wooden surface, surrounded by Fenna, Mama, and Papa. "Well, here's the other one." Minka realized he was talking to her, that the conversation had stopped, that he'd caught her spying. Feeling her face redden, she entered the room. He stood, his chair scraping against the floor. He was as tall as her father, who was himself the tallest man in town. But where Papa was rail-thin, Meneer de Vries had the powerful look of an athlete. He had ginger-colored hair and mustache and a chiseled, handsome face. Why, Minka wondered, noticing for the first time, had their mother ever allowed Fenna to wear that outgrown dress for company? The dress was so tight at the waist and the bodice that Fenna's breasts strained against the material. Fenna cared nothing for her looks. Her hair was the same white blonde as Minka's, but lacked luster. Her blue eyes bulged slightly, and her skin was ruddy from sunburn. She twitched with annoyance at Minka's intrusion. Please, Meneer de Vries pulled his chair from the table. He stared at Minka so intently that she thought something was expected from her, but she could not think what. Do sit down, he said, not taking his eyes from her. She glanced for permission at Mama, who shrugged in confusion. The visit was not going at all, as Mama had expected. I'm going to Amsterdam with Meneer de Vries. Fenna's voice had an edge. Mama laughed again from nerves. She badly wanted this job for Fenna, who was trouble in the household. In fact, Minka wanted her gone as well, and felt guilty for it, but it had been difficult going through school in Fenna's wake, doing anything in Fenna's wake. The boys expected Minka to be loose. The girls kept their distance. Better for Fenna to be far away in Amsterdam. Minka slipped into the empty chair Meneer had offered, not knowing what else to do with herself. Thank our guest, Minka, Mama said, and Minka tipped her face to him and said in a near whisper, Thank you, Meneer de Vries. So Minka is it, he said. That's a very pretty name. She looked down at her lap. She had been told to stay out of the parlor today, and here she was drawing the attention. And you would be the elder sister? She's younger, Fenna said. He considered this for a moment, then paced about the table, his hands locked behind his back. He stopped behind Fenna. Fenna, you're very like my Elizabeth, 2 peas in a pod. Fenna beamed. She could be cute in an impish way when she smiled, but that is why I am now glad to have met your sister. No one said anything. It didn't make sense. Minka had nothing to do with this arrangement. Meneer de Vries shut his eyes and canted his face toward the ceiling. It was a complete change in mood, as though just the mention of his ill wife had overcome him. His massive hands landed on Fenna's shoulders. My wife is a strong-willed woman, and I suspect that you too are strong-willed. I am, Fenna said, and Minka wondered how he knew that so quickly. He shook his head. Such a combination won't succeed. In the company of a strong-willed woman, my wife will fight, refuse medicine, disobey. In her final days, she needs a quieter soul. I see this quality in Minka. It is Minka who should come.
Oh my! So right off the bat, I love how books start. I love to find out, what does the reader learn at the very beginning? You're the who, what, where, when, why, all that sort of thing, and the setup is right there. The sibling rivalry, the expectation, the older man, the younger woman, the innocence, and obviously she's going to be going on a journey that was nothing she had planned at all. So beautifully set up. Before I want to ask you some questions about the editorial process, but before we do, tell me about the cover. Did you have any input at all? Because this cover is
gorgeous.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
Gorgeous.
Well, they sent me a cover a number of months ago, and it showed a woman from behind with her back was bare and sort of looking over her shoulder, but she was an older woman, and you just sort of got the sense that she was just a more mature woman and fleshier, and this is a young girl.
She's only 15.
Right, and the editorial people were very happy with it, and little by little I came to like it. I mean, I can come to like just about anything, so I had just about, but the salespeople, well, actually I shouldn't say, I said, when I first saw it, I raised all those objections, but I don't have in my contract whatever it is that says I can insist on anything.
Most writers don't. No.
Right. So, I mean, I said at first I didn't like it, but then they were also enthusiastic, and I knew. So I began to see ways in which
you look through other people's eyes.
Right, and maybe it would work. But then they gave it to the salespeople, and the salespeople said, "No way, it's not going to." And they made them go back, and this is what they came up with. And I just think it's lovely.
Oh, it is so
Lovely.
beautiful.
Yeah.
It captures the innocence of the 15-year-old, but it captures the rose. I mean, it captures the passion that she grows into it, the passion of the land, everything. I think, I just think it is the perfect cover. We just have a couple minutes left, Pam.
It goes by so fast. It's
gone by so fast. But I wanted to ask you, in the acknowledgement, you refer to several people who helped you shape the story. What are you talking about in terms of shaping the story with other people's help?
Well, there are a lot of people there. First is my writers group that I mentioned there, and they have heard the whole book several times. We've been together for many, many years, and I have complete trust in them. They're honest, they don't pull punches, and they're always kind. So it's the perfect combination. And I have a couple of other people who I send the book to, who read it through and give me feedback. And then when it came to sending it to my agent, and this is kind of interesting, one of the true stories that my grandmother actually wrote about was a shipwreck, of being on a ship from Comodoro to Buenos Aires, and the ship caught fire, and she and her husband managed to survive, although the crew went off with lifeboats. She was bitten by a shark. It was very, very exciting, and I thought, I have to use that in there. But the funny part of it was that when you try to put really true events into fiction, it is the thing that just doesn't work. So my agent read that, and she said, you just have to get rid of that shipwreck. It's just so funny, because that's something I knew, and I thought, well, maybe just this once it'll work.
Fit it in.
So she really helped do that, and to restructure a part of the end. She made some suggestions, and then when it got into the editorial process, I actually had two editors. One who had bought the book and who had worked on my previous book, but she left. But she left after she had sent me the whole manuscript with all her notes on it. So I waited until my new editor raised what she thought were going to be issues with it, and then I had those notes, and they were the same. So I was able to use that, and so I really had a lot of help from both editors, but I think I mostly used the notes from the first editor.
I think you had a fortunate experience with wonderful editors, fabulous writers group, and a story from your grandmother. And that's a great combination. Pam, I'm so glad you came here today and were able to share some aspects of the story. And for you in the viewing audience, I love to close with the words of the fantasy writer Ursula Le Guin, who said, "There have been civilizations that did not use the wheel, but there have been no civilizations that did not tell stories." So find your story, find a way to tell it, and do join us again next time. Thank you.
Food for the crew and guests was provided by Manchester Grill of Manchester, Connecticut, and Angelo's Restaurant of Glastonbury, Connecticut. Be sure to send your writing questions and your comments on the book club selection to Zita at page 1, P.O. Box 1515, Manchester, Connecticut, 06045-1515, or send an email to Zita at page1tv.com.